Hi, I'm Dale Popovich, and we are recording our Facebook Live back at our log cabin today. For some reason, we could not get it formatted right yesterday, even though people could see us and hear us. It just wasn't working out, so we canceled from Land O'Lakes, and we're back in our cabin this morning, and we're going to shoot the demonstration that I intended to do yesterday. So follow me along, please. So today I'm using my 1-inch ox hair brush. I've had this for probably over 40 years. I'm using a 3/4 inch pointed oval from Rosemary, one of my favorite brushes. And I'm using a 1/2 inch pointed oval from Rosemary. Sometimes people call those cat tongues. I'm using a Meaden, very small. I don't know what the number is anymore, but it was a cheaper brush set. And I'm using a number 3 round, which you can see here, one of my smaller brushes. I'm also using the very smallest brush I have, and this is a rigger or a liner brush, and it's about 1 inch long. I have another one that's about 1.5 inches long. And I'm also maybe using a number 8 Royal brush. It's a natural choice. All my brushes are natural hair. And of course, my wife's toothbrush. Anyways, what I want to get you involved in as far as the watercolor is the process on how to build a painting and what you need to do. But first, I want to show you very quickly. This is cross mixing of sap green with every other color that I usually use during my workshops or demonstrations. I have other colors I do use occasionally in the studio, but this is sap green by itself all the way across, just adding more water. And then as I go down, this is sap green with yellow medium, and I just add a little bit of yellow medium going across to where it almost goes to yellow medium here. It's not quite. But I had sap green with raw sienna on the 3rd row. These charts are very easy to make. This is sap green with brown, transparent brown oxide. So it gets a little bit more brown here, but we started losing the green right about here, and it went a little bit more brown, but that's okay. The idea is to see how the colors cross mix together. And this is the brown matter. I use brown matter in place of the alizarin crimson. Most of the time it's a fugitive color, which means it fades fast. But I use the brown matter, which is basically alizarin and burnt sienna mixed together. It's a little bit more friendly. I don't know the exact mixture, but this gives you a different type of green here. It's a little bit more earthy to about this point, and it starts getting more brown. But this is just to see on how things react with other colors. Again, the sap green with a little bit of cobalt and more cobalt as we go over this way. That's cobalt violet, excuse me. So it gets a little bit more violet, but you still end up with some interesting colors as you go across. And then this is the manganese blue mixed in with the sap green, and you can see it gets a little bit, we kind of lose the greenish look right about here. But you can get different variations. This is the cobalt blue, and this last one here is the ultramarine blue. So these are the colors that I always use during any type of demonstration or workshop. I prefer using a limited palette 9 times out of 10. And then this is a very simple chart of glazing. So this first row, I painted sap green all the way across. The second row was the yellow medium all the way across and the raw sienna all the way across. You could put them in any order you want, but I put the yellows and into the browns and then the blues and so forth. And this is the transparent brown oxide all the way across. So I did this all the way across, all the way down. Any order is fine. And then what I did, once this all dried, I painted down the same order of color. So this is the sap green over the sap green and then over the other colors. So you're getting, this is the yellow medium and this is the raw sienna. So you're getting a large variety of cross mixing. So when you do a wash across another color, the color underneath will influence the color that you put on top, and which is kind of a nice thing. It's a good chart to do with all the colors that you use. Again, these are the only colors that I use during workshops or demonstrations. What we're looking at today, I am using core watercolor paints, except for one color, that is the brown matter. It's Winsor Newton. Core doesn't make the brown matter, but I'm using the cobalt blue, the ultramarine, the sap green, the yellow medium, the transparent brown oxide, and the brown matter. Now, the brown matter was not listed in the packet. I added that at the last minute, but if you don't have brown matter, or you could take the alizarin crimson, and you could take the either burnt sienna or the transparent brown oxide if you're using core paints, and mix them together to get more of an earthy looking crimson color. Let's put it that way. But when you're using alizarin crimson, they do sell permanent alizarin crimson. So make sure that you look for that when you're ordering anything. Now, what I'm mostly concerned about is the patterns of lights and darks. This is the same way oil painters will approach their painting. Many of them will block in the darks against the lights. They paint from dark to light. We paint from light to dark, or the values come out lighter. So what I'm going to do is we're going to work wet on wet, which means wetting the paper and then applying wet pigment to it. So I am not saturating the paper in any way. I am basically sprinkling on with my spray just a little bit of water. I don't want it saturated where everything is flying all over the place. It will have some control with it. So I'm taking the cobalt blue with a little bit of the sap green, not too much. Sometimes I'll just put a dab on the palette, and a little bit of the yellow medium. And I mean a little bit, just enough. And I'm going to start by putting in this. I'm going to make this very, very light. And I'm going to go up here and I'm going to paint in what I feel the sky should be. Now, remember, you have to remember that watercolor dries lighter 9 times out of 10, especially the darks, up to 50% lighter. But you'll watch on how these things will dry as you move through your watercolor. Now I'm putting down the implant of the pattern of light and dark. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to start adding the green to this. And I'm going to add a little bit of the brown oxide to it, so it's slightly, ever so slightly gray, and a little bit of blue, cobalt blue, and a little bit of ultramarine blue. Now, one of the things that I'm always telling us to do, don't overmix your colors. Go through it once, that's it. So you have a variety of color that you put down initially. So I'm going to kind of hint at the pine trees here, just a little bit. Like so. And this is pretty wet. Now I'm going to add a little bit more ultramarine blue to the green and a little bit of the sap or the brown oxide down here at the bottom to get this a little bit darker. And I'm always painting in the direction of the way the earth moves, whether it's a mountainside or the trees or whatever the case be, paint in the direction in which you have the movement going. So taking a little bit more ultramarine here. I'm going to get this a little bit more grayed down slightly, a little bit more blue. And I'm over here, and timing is everything. I'm drying the brush off just a little bit. And timing in watercolor is everything. So I wanted this a little bit more grayer over here, and I can kind of fidget around. But this is the fastest part of a watercolor, is the very beginning. You slow your process down quite a bit as you move through. But this is a little bit grayer. I don't want this being conflicting with the rest of the painting. And I have an open field back here, and I'm going to take this color in here that I've already mixed up. I don't want a lot of water in with it, but a little bit. And I'm going to make this more yellow back here to help draw your eye than what that light green is back there. And just let it kind of go on up into the subject matter. Then I'm going to take the green here and the cobalt mix it in with a little bit of that yellow. And I'm going to bring this darkness down here, like so. And then I'm seeing spots here and there that need some dark. And I'm just going to travel it all. I want everything kind of connected at this point. Then I'm going to take the green here with the yellow. So we get kind of a nice yellow green. Take a little bit of cobalt here. And I'm going to put in this green here. And I'm going to travel partway across. This scene here was actually across and down a road from the log cabin, from where we're at right now, where we're living. And it's just the beginning of the swampy area that's back there. Now, I've done this scene before, I have to admit. And actually, it was flipped the other way. I flipped it this way so that it has a different appearance. I'm going to take some burnt sienna here, and I'm going to mix it in. I'm going to put it in over here where a lot of the pine needles have fallen and gathered over the years. I'm going to bring that right down to here. I also want to put a little bit over in here. Move the color around so we have a little bit of unification of color. And we have the basic block in for this watercolor. Now, the idea is not to take the hair dryer and start spraying it or start drying it, especially when the water is glistening. I find that most of my thoughts that go into a painting of what to do next, where to go, is at this point, you sit down, you watch it dry. Sit on your hands if you have to. Let me do some little advertisement here while this is drying. I have a workshop coming up January 11th at Hazelhurst Community Center with the Lakeland Art League. Some wonderful people. Then in May 29th to June 3rd at Dillman's, I'm doing a 4-day workshop on river, rapids, and waterfalls, which should be a lot of fun. So we get in a lot of water movement, some shorelines, and so forth. During the same time, my wife, Mary Lee, is at Dillman's also for a 4-day workshop. And it's about art marketing, how to put your presence into the public, which is very important for any artist. And she's very good at what she does. And then finally, what I have scheduled so far is another workshop at Dillman's from September 17th to the 22nd. And that is Impressions of the Great North Woods. So I have 2 different workshops that are detailed into specific things. My wife has that one workshop in art marketing. So if you have any questions, you can always call Dillman's or the Lakeland Art League that is out of Hazelhurst, Wisconsin, which is just south of Minocqua.
If you would like to support Dale buy him a cup of coffee, you can go to the website, which is ko-fi.com/Dale Popovich. And we are trying to raise funds to be able to do get some techie stuff. We've already done a little bit. We got earbuds for Dale. So he has a mic and earbuds to go with our new telephones that don't have phone jacks in them anymore. And our internet guy told us that we need to have a 60-foot tower to be able to get better coverage and be able to film all this in our log cabin. So if you would like to support Dale, it's also at his website, which is dalepopovich.com. And you'll see that little coffee cup with a heart on it. And that if you click on it, it'll take you to the page where you can make a donation. We really appreciate everybody that has donated. So, okay.
And some of my students have donated, which is greatly appreciated.
And some people that we don't even know have donated.
Which
So,
we really appreciate also, too.
thank you.
Yesterday, we actually went out into a mini blizzard into Land O'Lakes to film the Facebook Live Having the tower we wouldn't have to do that, but we don't mind doing it, trust me. We moved up here for a reason, because we like the North Woods and all of its seasons. Getting snowed in is always kind of a nice thing. That means you don't have to go out and do anything or see anybody. We just want to take and do our artwork up here and live a more peaceful life and enjoy the woods and the wildlife, which we have deer roaming through our backyard and front yard daily. All right, this is still wet. I don't want to do anything with it just yet. Mainly because we have the glistening of water here. The texture of the indigo watercolor paper I fell in love with about 4 or 5 years ago. My wife ordered it for me, actually, while we were driving home back to Indiana, and she asked me if I had ever used the indigo paper, and I never heard of it. And I was always using the Arches watercolor paper, Fabriano. I still do, but for the woodland scenes and so forth, with that little bit higher texture to the paper, lends itself towards a lot of good texture for the forest scenes and so forth. So actually, I like it a lot. While we let that dry just for a moment, I will explain one other chart I have here. Just hang on for a minute. These are the colors. These are all the colors that I use. These are the colors that I use for workshops and demonstrations. This is a cadmium yellow medium, the raw sienna, the brown oxide. Like I say, burnt sienna is a substitute. This is the burnt sienna down here, but you can see this is a little bit more intense. This is the brown matter. This is the sap green, ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, manganese blue, which is your coolest color. Ultramarine blue is your warmer blue. It's still a cool color, but it's warmer. And finally, the cobalt violet. The other colors that I use down below, this is the yellow light, which is a cooler yellow compared to the yellow medium. Then I have the dairy light yellow. I used to use cadmium orange years ago, but this is not quite cadmium orange, but it's an equivalent to what I need for fall scenes and so forth. In fact, when you take the brown matter and the yellow medium, or this color here, you get some wonderful fall color variations. This is the yellow, cadmium yellow deep, which I use that occasionally. This is permanent gamboge, wonderful color. You can see down here, if I'll bring this up to the camera, on how yellow it is here in its more watery, and here it is more in its pure form. And then yellow ochre I use occasionally because of the winter, the grass that comes through from the fall and the winter through the snow is a little bit more like this. You can get away with raw sienna, but the yellow ochre is a cooled grade down yellow, where the raw sienna is a warm grade down yellow. And then finally, the burnt sienna is equivalent to that. The pyrrole orange, I've used that in a number of paintings in the fall when you have that real intense orange with a little bit of yellow. Here's the Mars orange deep. I use that on rare occasions. Now here's the permanent alizarin crimson right here. The permanent alizarin crimson is what you're looking for. Just don't get alizarin crimson, because the regular alizarin crimson will fade on you. So this is the permanent. And then this is the brown matter that I replaced it with, but occasionally I'll use this. Usually in some cases, when I'm painting red barns, I really like the color vermilion. It works very well for red barns by adding a little bit of yellow to it. But the vermilion has a wonderful color. I don't have it on the chart here. This is the version of the cobalt violet that another version of this in the core watercolor paints. Now, the core watercolor paints are created by Golden Colors. They created the acrylic paints. And then finally, this is a rare, interesting color that I use on rare occasions, but it's called Caput Mortem Violet. It's got a lot of violet in it, but it has a lot of brown in it. And it's an interesting color when you're working in various scenes and so forth. Occasionally, it's great for graying colors down when you're using very limited colors like 3 colors. Occasionally, I'll use 3 colors or 4 colors, but just to get a certain effect. But you don't always have to paint with all the colors that are on your palette. I only put out what I need, and that's what I use. I do not put down more than 6 or 7 colors, on a rare occasion 7, because you end up juggling too many colors. So I try to always limit the color and learn how to cross mix those colors in various ways to get various different colors. And you learn color faster, easier that way than putting out a ton of color and then you end up not using them, or you forget what you mixed it with. If you limit your color, you'll remember better of how you cross mix those colors. Then you can institute another color if you wish. So we're getting down here to where there is no glistening of water. It still needs to dry a little bit more, so I'm going to go and I'm going to use my hair dryer. They had a small earthquake up here called my foot. And let me plug in my hair dryer for a moment. And usually I hold it fairly far away from the painting, not right on it. But I want this to be totally dry, because right now we have a little bit of spring in the paper. If you feel it with the back of your hand, it's cool. Okay, we're back to where we can paint. I did fail to mention, I am on a 1/4 sheet of watercolor paper of the indigo. I buy, I would say 99% of my stuff from Cheap Joe's. There's an advertisement for you, Cheap Joe. I feel that they're very good at getting your order out and also having all of your supplies that you need. So back to the background. Okay, now the block-in method that I'm using, I always use 95% of the time, is always working from large areas to small areas. So you're getting an imprint of what you're trying to paint. Sometimes you can't do that with certain subject matters. I understand that. You're working from background to foreground, and the background to foreground is very important because of the layering process. So when you go back into your painting every time, it's back to the background until that's finished, and you start finishing as it all comes up. So it's very much like a Polaroid film. The younger generation might not understand that, but Polaroid film develops all at one time, not parts and pieces. So you don't want to do parts and pieces because you'll end up with a segmented watercolor. So I'm going to go back to the background here. I also painted my colors a little bit more intense at the beginning, not real intense because it doesn't call for it. But you paint your colors more intense to gray as you move through the painting. And then finally, last, you're painting your values a little bit lighter to a little bit darker. So it is reverse of oil painting. So I'm going to go back to the background here, and I'm going to take my smaller brush here, or my smaller brushes. I think I'll take my small cat tongue here to start with. And I'm going to paint that scenery way in the background, those pine trees. I'm going to take some of the cobalt blue and a little bit of the olive green. And again, I'm going to add a little bit of water to it because I want it on the light side. The more water you add to your watercolor, the lighter it becomes. And I'm going to start by dry brushing this in the background. Like so, dry it off on the paper towel just a little bit. And like I said, this paper is very adaptive to the texture and so forth that I'm looking for. And I slow my process down. So I'm more concerned about the tops of the trees than I am the bottom, because that distinguishes them in this particular case from other trees. These are pine trees in the background. And I'm going to change the color a little bit as I move. I don't want it all the same. And I'm moving through this, and I am painting just this background back here, the way in the background. Now, as it comes down, it gets a little bit less light. And what I'm going to do to have this fill in just a little bit is I'm going to take the toothbrush, because it's becoming a little bit too busy. I don't want to add too much more watercolor to it. You will find, which I think is really amazing, on how many different watercolors paint so differently. Sometimes more than oil painters, I think, because it is a medium that is a little bit harder to control. And it is more frustrating. And I'm using the watercolor a little bit heavier down at the bottom here. And I'm going to take the toothbrush here with a little bit of cobalt blue on it. Grab a little bit of that green there to gray it down. And I'm going to spray that into the bottom here. So what I'm doing is I'm adding watercolor without putting the brush to the paper, which allows me to add more pigment and not have the pigment picked up, because every time you do touch the paper, the pigment does come up a little bit. So the background has basically been put in. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to that now. And I don't want this yellow back here to stick out too much. So I am toning it down. And I'm just going to kind of dry brush it in there, create a little bit of grassiness to the feeling. I'm going to add maybe a little bit of an accent of color back in here. Just like this, very quickly, nothing too important. Right across. And I want to carry it right on through here too, because I want to see this part of this sticking out, or coming through, I should say, into the foreground. And then it gets a little bit greener as it comes forward. I'm doing all this right now so that it has set so I can go into the sides and so forth. So I'm going to go into the sides right now, and I'm going to mix up the ultramarine blue, and I'm mixing right into the old piles of color. A little bit of the burnt sienna, a little bit more green, and a touch of the brown madder. A little bit more than a touch. There we go. Now that has a tendency of graying things down a little bit. And also adding just a touch of warmth to the color green. Now, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to simply, again, block big masses in here. I'm being a little bit more conscious with how I'm moving the brush. I'm pushing and pulling it to get some of that feeling of the pine trees. And I think manipulation of the brush becomes very important. You see this turn a little bit more brown green in here. It's going to pick up a little bit more light. I'm going to have a little bit warmer pigment coming out, but I'm very, very conscious of how I'm putting it down. I'm not trying to show any tree trunks at this time, even though I'm going to put one in there. Sometimes I'll have two brushes in my hand at the same time. And I'm looking at the photograph to a certain extent. I'm also looking at the painting. The thing I'm always telling the students, remember you're painting the painting, not the photograph. You're interpreting what you need for the photograph, and then you're putting it down in various ways. Now we're getting into a little bit more dark shadow down here. You don't want to overbrush your watercolor. You want to try to keep it very simple. Don't go over it again and again with a brush stroke. I'm dry brushing, so I'm kind of filling in a little bit here and there. And I'm going to take the toothbrush again. You're not allow the watercolor to mix by itself on the paper. Don't try to paint as you're painting a wall. You're not trying to flatten it out. So now I'm coming down into this part here, and I'm kind of rolling with the landscape.
My name is Matt Foreman.
My name's Rhonda Hughes. I am Allison Coleman.
Family business.
And I'm going to take a little bit of yellow in here at that point with a little bit of the green. And I'm going to add a little bit in here. So I keep on adding and subtracting a little bit here, a little bit there. If I feel that I went too far, that's what God made paper towels for. So I've got this a little bit blocked in on this side here, and I'm going to block in it again a little bit more as I come across. So I'm using a little bit more blue in this case down here. And I want to put in, as I said, I don't go put in tree trunks right away, but in this particular case, I am. And the tree trunk is going to be more green than anything. But I'm going to run that tree trunk right up through here. I'm going to build this. And another one right here. And then I'm going to put one right in here that's a little bit larger. Because I feel we need to build out. I want this to be a larger mass of dark than what's in the photograph. Since we're working abstract to realism, I'm not following the photograph exactly all the way. Sometimes the photograph can be a hindrance, but I'm working it to where it works for the painting. And I'm just bringing out some light things here. If I bring out the dark too much, I'll develop that later. It's not going to work as well. So I'm going to bring in some darks down here at the bottom because we're in shadow here. And I'm using shorter brush strokes. They're combining, but they're not showing the actual brush stroke too much. And then I'm going to come down into the lower half here. And I'm going to take the green and the yellow medium. And I'm going to start working this. Now, the color I'm putting over the bluish green here will influence what I'm putting on top. And then we come out to more of the light. And these are still big, broad brush strokes. It's nothing too short of doing little things, okay? And I am going to take the cobalt blue at this time, and I'm just going to spritz a little bit in here to give this a little bit of flavor. And I'm going to do the same thing with the transparent brown oxide. You'll give a little bit of warmth in the foreground. Make sure that's rinsed out real well. And I'm gonna travel across the painting and come up the other side and come down to this corner. And that will encompass the kind of the rest of what I need to add at this point. I'm gonna add a little bit more yellow to it because we're getting out into the light area. Now, I'm not painting over everything that you're seeing here. I'm leaving little parts and pieces show. That's important. I always feel gives a little bit of depth to what we're doing. And then I'm coming up to some darker areas here. So I'm adding the sap green to the ultramarine blue, and we're going to add a little bit of that in here, and I'm going to add a little bit of the burnt sienna to it, or the brown oxide. Sometimes you'll find me calling it burnt sienna. It's mostly the brown, transparent brown oxide. I'm going to add a little bit of water in here just to make this flow a little bit nicer. Like so. Now I'm going to add some of that brown oxide with the yellow and a lot of water down in here, and I'm going to dry brush it. So I'm leaving a lot of the color from the previous wash show through. Again, that will give us a little bit of a feeling of value changes. And I want to take a little bit of that color across here so that it does, excuse me, it does combine with other things. Now, I'm going to clean my palette at this point, which I do quite often to make sure my colors don't become overly grayed, overly muddled, or muddied color. And I'm slowly going to start at the top, and I'm going to come down. So I'm going to take my smaller cat tongue here, and I'm going to start with the green again, and a little bit of the cobalt blue, and some of the transparent brown oxide. A little bit of the brown matter too. We need to warm that up. So I'm trying to get that grayish green color, and it almost looks like a mossy green. Need a little bit more blue here. There's a number of trees up here, especially the balsas, that got hit with a bug and they're dying. So I'm trying to create that little bit of that feeling. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to dry brush just enough up in here. And I'm going to start filling it in a little bit more as we move to the right here, or to the left, a little bit darker. It's going to become more open as we move through this. And I'm changing color just a slight bit. And I'm got kind of dry brushing in a downward direction at this point to help fill it in. I'm also going to take the toothbrush with a little bit of the green mixed in here with the same colors, and I'm going to spritz this in here to give us the feeling of color, temperature, and value change. And then I'm going to come out and I want to try to connect a little bit of this up in here so it kind of encloses for us. There's some important darks I want to put down as a mental note to what's up there. And if I feel it's too choppy, I can always spritz some water on it. And that will go ahead and soften it. You always try to keep your edges as soft as you can for as long as you can, so that your eye is not attracted to it. I just have a little bit down here, but I want to get this going across here. I feel this is important to close in the woods a little bit more. So I've got a little bit more cobalt blue in this than I had back here. Just by a slight bit. And while this is wet, I'm going to take a little bit of cobalt blue off on that side. I want it a little bit cooler, so I'm going to spray a little bit more blue over there. The toothbrush I found to be a very handy tool. By applying watercolor, I can shoot it in a little bit more carefully than I used to by tapping a brush or using something else. I'm not worried about the tree trunks as you've seen. I'm simply worried about the big masses and how things are going to look. So I'm going to be very careful, run a little bit slower in this case. Because I don't want to put down too much too quickly. This is where you slow your process down. This is where I put my brush down at a certain point, and I'm going to clean off the palette again. Now we have a pretty good imprint of the photograph we're using. Still a few things I need to do, but I'm going to lift. So I'm taking my 1-inch brush here and I'm cleaning it, and I'm going to pull all the water out of it. And I want this back here to show a little bit more light. So I'm going to lift this up carefully. I'm going to go in and soften a couple edges here that I don't like. And I'm going to pull out a couple things in here to show that that pasture back there has a tendency of going through behind the woods here. So we get a little feeling of some more depth happening back here. And so I'm being very careful where I lift at this point, not too much. That's why we always kind of go very carefully into a watercolor. And I have a few things back here to lift. Now this has a little bit of glistening of water, but I think if I pull it up at this stage, it should stay as an opening. So we're seeing this kind of travel across here. Now at this point, we're going to wait again. And we're going to analyze what we need to do next. And what I'm doing, I'm looking at, should I start here or should I start there? Again, we're always starting in the background and coming forward. I think I may add a little bit of distinction back in here, but I'm not 100% sold on that. I might do a couple little things here. I don't like that going straight across right here. So I'll probably allow that to rise up. Or right now, what I think I'll do in that case is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to model it up here so that I don't have to do that. There's certain things you can do and there's certain things you don't want to do. To understand your mistakes sometimes, take old paintings and see if you can finish them, experiment on them, try to figure out what you could have done different. What I'm doing right now is I'm lifting little areas here and there that I feel are important. But I took about, I would say 60 or 70 paintings, and I experimented with them with different techniques, with different ideas, adding more color, subtracting color. And I got down to where I found I could do a lot of more correcting than I ever thought I could do on a watercolor. I learned so much by doing corrections on it. And one of the things you have to do is have no fear. The only thing that is going to die is a piece of paper. Yes, some pigment, but the piece of paper. And experimentation is the best thing. If you are having fear about what you're doing or fear that you're going to make a mistake, then you're never going to proceed forward. So you have to have that that feeling go away and say, okay, I'm going to do the very best I can. And if it doesn't work, okay, I'll try again. But the worst mistake you can make is not picking up your brush and doing it. And doing it once a week doesn't work. When I was a student, I was doing on an average, but not all the time, on an average of 3 paintings a day, 1/4 sheet, and then 1/8 of a sheet, 2 of them at night after class. And made all the mistakes in the world, but it took me almost 4 months to get one decent painting because I was terrible at the beginning. I didn't understand watercolor. I took a year of oil, but that helped me in cross mixing colors and so forth. But it's always a good thing to go in and figure out, if I did this, this would happen. If I did that, that would happen. Right now, I am actually manipulating some of the watercolor to a lighter mode in certain areas that I feel are needed. Not so much according to the photograph, but to what I feel it needs for the painting. And that's what you always have to consider. What do I have to do for the painting? And I'm pulling out a certain amount of light here that I feel is needed at this point. And again, there's things in the photograph I'm not even going to bother with because I don't feel they're needed. It's always more important what you leave out than what you put in. And I'm going in here and I'm doing all sorts of little things that hopefully will mean something by the end of the painting. There's a light spot on the right-hand side here. I don't want to emphasize it too much, but I feel it needs to be noted that it is there. And what I can do to get a little bit of more texture in here is to take the toothbrush, because it's basically almost dry. And I'm going to spray a little bit of water in here. Wait a couple seconds, and then I'm going to pull it up. It works great in dark spots. I didn't want too much taken up, but just enough, a little bit more. It has to be perfectly dry to make it work correctly. I'll do more later, but I'm going to take the hair dryer just simply because of the time. Usually I'll sit back and have a cup of coffee while it dries. So hang on for a moment. Always feel it with the back of your hand for the fact that the oil on the palm will affect the painting down the road somewhere, and you don't want that to happen. So now we're totally dry. We don't have any glistening spots. It's not dry all the way down the bottom because I'm getting a little bit of this bounce, but it is dry enough to work on in most cases. Usually I would wait till it dries all the way to where there's none of this bounce here. But we're okay at this point. Now, I am going to go back in to the left-hand side of the painting first. And I'm going to take this smaller number 8 brush. It's got a short handle, which I got it as a gift, but that's good. So I'm taking the ultramarine blue, the sap green, a little bit of the brown matter, and a lot of cobalt blue. And I'm taking what's on my brush and putting it over here. So I have more cobalt blue, and I want to see what color that is. I'm gonna add a little bit more blue to that. Because you can, when you're looking at a dark color as over here, you need to add some water to it to see what it is doing, what color it is, because you can't see the true color in a dark form. So I'm drying the brush off here, and I'm gonna go back in here and I'm gonna add some other color in here, but it needs a little bit more blue, I think. Yeah, that's better. And I'm gonna dry brush in some of this color. Again, on top of what's there, again, not covering everything that was there. I'm still allowing the two initial washes on there to show through. If I feel that needs a little bit of coaxing to come together, I take the toothbrush and water, and I'm going to block this in a little bit more dense over here, so your eye is not going too much in that direction, leaving openings here and there for the light. Not worried about, again, not worried about the tree trunks just yet. I'm going to use a little bit bigger brush here, and I'm going to block in the bottom a little bit more heavily. I'll worry about what peeks through later. And again, back to dry brushing. And add a little bit more cobalt blue to that again. And I'm going to carry this over. And I'm being very conscious that these are pine boughs that are in here. So I'm trying to paint the feeling of some of that and being conscious about where the trees are going to be. Or the tree trunks, I should say. Now I'm going to come across to the other side. And I want to put a little more emphasis on these over here, not much, but just a little bit. Bring it on down and into the other pine trees. And what I'm going to do while this is still wet, but it's not too wet, I'm going to pull up some distinctive lights running through here. All the way down to the ground here. Just to show light coming through the trees into the background there. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to take the sap green, mix it right in with the same colors I had over here. Take a little bit more of the ultramarine blue and a touch of the brown madder. You'll find that every artist has their colors or favorite colors that they like to rely on for different color combinations. It's all their opinion and basis. They'll give you reasons and so forth, which is all fine. It's all very good. And I'm going to make some darker passages up in here with dry brushing. And I'm just allowing some of these little things to come out here and there while this is still wet. I'm going to hit a few little things in here. But it's nice to see different approaches to painting, because if we're all the same, how boring would that be? And then I'm coming down in here. This is quite a bit darker in here, but again, it's getting these masses put down in the right place at the right time. I'm going to add a little bit of that color over here because I do want this darker. I got a little bit dark coming down in here. There is a creek that goes through here. It's dried up at this point, but I want to show that ditch just a little bit. Like I said, I've done this painting before, and Every time I do it, it comes out different, which is the nice part. I never paint the same thing twice the same way. So I'm mixing up a green and adding more of that brown matter to it. And I want to come down here. And even in the dark areas, you want to make the dark areas semi-interesting, but never interesting because of the fact that your eye is attracted to contrast of value. And if you have all these things going on in here in the dark area, which you don't see that many value changes in the dark area, you always see them in the light areas. So I'm bringing this down into here, like so. And then I'm dry brushing out into this area here. And I'm looking at how things lead the eye and so forth. Fill this in a little bit. Then we have this dip up and it comes down. And again, if something is a little bit too hard edged over here, I'll spray it with a little bit of water and I'm gonna leave it alone. Now I'm going to come over to the middle ground area and I'm going to use a little bit more of the green and a little bit more of the yellow. Bring it out to here. And my values are a little bit less dark. They're more subtle. I'm going to start to close in on this yellow green that's in the background here. A little bit more yellow, just a tad more. And we have a little bit more yellow with the blue here, cobalt blue. A little bit more yellow again. And some more of the cobalt blue. I don't want it as green as what it's in the photograph over here. Then I'm going to take the burnt sienna, mix it right across with a little bit of the cobalt. And I'm going to dry the brush off and kind of drag that downhill here. Then I'm going to take the toothbrush with pure brown oxide on it, transparent brown oxide. I'm also going to add a little bit over in here, like so. And I'm going to take a little bit of the yellow straight, mix it right up in this corner. And I'm going to spritz it right back in here. Gives it just a little bit of glowing back there. I know it's kind of a yellow green back there, but I really wanted yellow to show up. And I'm going to put a few little yellow spritzes in here to pull that color forward. Now, I am going to put in this kind of a zigzaggy ditch here. I'm not concerned again about the trees just yet, but I want to see what that ditch is going to do. Would I do it here? No. I'm going to bring it out over here for the fact that if I brought it the way it is in the photograph here, it's going to be too distinct going right down the middle. I could also bring it over here, but I think I'm going to bring it off to the right. So I'm going to take a little bit of that brown and the green because it has a lot of green in it. And I'm going to tip this up just a little bit towards me so that I can see it without glistening. And I'm going to start it right back in here. I put it into a wet spot so that it has a tendency of dissipating. And then I'm going to start it again here. And it kind of comes over this way, and then I'm going to have it come this way, like so, and then zigzag it back and forth. It doesn't have to look like the actual dry ditch that's in there. But I'm initiating it now so that I know where I'm going. Now, again, something you could put in or not put in. There's a number of things you can do with this, but I decided to go ahead and put it in and show a little bit more. And I just kind of tail it off over here. Not to put too much work into it, because otherwise you'll end up overworking it. It'll look like a big hole in your paper. You don't want to do that. So while this is maybe a little wet, I'm going to put in a few saplings here with my fingernail. I can work around that later. Take paper towel and tap up just a little bit at the bottom there. I'll be adding the tree trunks next to see where I need to go, but I need to have a lot of this dry just another moment. Anyways, I want to thank you again for watching this on the recording part. I'm looking out our window right now at the snow scene. We've had several inches of snow in the last several days, and it's really quite pretty as it comes out of the shadow into the woods. There's a field probably about 200 feet through the woods, and it's lit up with this yellow hitting the snow from the sun. It's absolutely beautiful. But everything in the foreground is cool and or cooler because it's in shadow, except for a few warm hits on the red pine trees where they light up a little bit more. So again, I think I'm going to take the hair dryer for time wise and see what we can do with this. I usually don't like to rush things, but we're going to do it. What I did not mention at the beginning, I did mention that this is 300-pound paper. If you're working, I tape it all the way around so it stays down. Back in the day when I was a student, we were working on 90-pound paper, which I don't recommend, but it was cheaper as a student, of course. But I wouldn't work on anything less than 140-pound. But if you're working on 140-pound, tape it across the top only, and then 2 tabs of tape on the sides, because it has to expand and contract. The 300-pound doesn't do much of that. It does a little bit. You can see a little bit of bounce here that's going on. But on the 300-pound, you can tape it all the way around. Another option is to not tape it down at all. When you're wetting the surface, just start painting and allow, whether it's 300-pound or 140-pound, allow it to expand and contract by itself. But leave it dry, all completely dry to the touch of the hand. It, like I said, this still got a little bit of bounce in, but not much. But you want to try to do different things, but you don't always have to tape it down. I like taping it down for the fact that I can see when I take the tape off what a mat may look like on it. And that to me is important to me. It might not be to another artist, but that's okay. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm changing water because my water has gotten quite dirty. I don't want my color to be dirty. I usually change it maybe 2 or 3 times, depending on the size of the painting. I don't like to be painting with dirty water. Now, the other thing is that when you are working on watercolor paper, make sure it's 100% cotton. If it isn't, it doesn't say it, even on those, I would say pads of watercolor paper, it means it has wood fiber in it. And the wood fiber will end up pilling on you and causing more havoc than you can even think of. Same thing with watercolor. Do not buy an off-brand watercolor. Stay with the professional brands. You'll have less problem with it by a long shot. If you buy an off-name brand that's a student grade, you'll end up having major problems and using twice as much paint to get the effect that you would have with the professional grade paint. But it is something that I always tell the students, if you're going to paint, it's like going golfing. You need a good set of golf balls, you need good clubs, and you need a decent golf course to be on. You can get away with a little bit cheaper brush. In other words, the synthetic real hair mix. Like I say, the real hair loads better. I never use a synthetic brush hardly at all. I have probably 2 in there, and I use them for lifting color, but they don't load the same way. Again, this is a personal option with me. I don't say that you can't use them, but my professional opinion is I would not use them. Okay, now we're getting into the final phase. All the large areas are set, and I'm going to start painting the tree trunks in so I can see what they look like. I'm going to start off on the right-hand side, and I'm going to start with the darker tree trunk. So I'm taking the ultramarine blue and the brown matter to start. Now you can see that if I take and add a lot of water to this, you get kind of a violet color. This is a red violet in this case. I'm going to add a little bit of the more blue to this to get it darker. And I'm also going to add the transparent brown oxide to it and a little bit more ultramarine blue. Tree trunks can be various colors. They're not brown, they're not gray. It depends on the light and the type of tree. But I'm going to put in the first tree here that I feel is the darkest off over here. And I'm going to kind of weave it in and out of the boughs of the branches here. And it comes down, and I'm going to bring it down closer to us by planting on the ground down further. And I have other brushes here that I'm going to use. I'm going to watch my size of the trees, that they're not all the same thicknesses. And I'm also going to look at the spacing of the trees, that they're different spacings, that they're not equal. Since we didn't have the farmers come in and plant these trees, they're planted more naturally. This one needs to be a little bit darker in here. So I'm adding a little bit of the blue and the brown matter together and adding some of the green. This one needs to come down a little bit quicker. And I'm going to pull out even a smaller brush that I'm playing with here. And a lot of green will influence the trees quite a bit. So I'm going to add a lot of water to this up in here. And a little bit more green. And then go back and grab some of the blue. And I'm going to put another tree in here. We need a little bit more blue though. And again, I'm weaving it in and out of the boughs of the tree. I'm going to put another one here. And again, I'm being very conscious of where they're going, what color they are, how they're moving in and around. I'll put smaller trees in later, but right now I'm concentrating on the much larger ones. I'm going to put a larger one right back here. I mean, a big one. That comes down behind these trees here. Kind of gets lost into the pines there. And then right here, I'll worry about the branches on the trees later. Now I'm going to come across the other side. I don't want to work too far along on one side. These are going to have a little bit different color to them. I'm kind of dry brushing them in here so that they're not totally solid. You don't need them solid. But I'm being very conscious that you can't see all of the tree or the tree trunk. It's something that you never see in the woods anyways, unless they're hardwoods and you're in a hardwood forest in the fall where all the leaves have come down. And I'm going to add a little bit more burnt sienna to this combination. As we come out into the light, they're going to get a little bit more warm temperature on. I'm going to bring that one down a little bit more. And I'm making sure every tree is just a little bit different. Size, temperature, color, value, so that they don't appear to be too much the same. So it's a slow process of building the watercolor as we move through it. If you run through it too quick at the end, that's where the mistakes are made. If you don't have it planned at the beginning, again, you're going to make mistakes also. So I'm going to tip this up just a little bit towards me so I can see it without too much of a glare. And I'm going to put in a warmer value tree back here. As I'm going back, perspective-wise, I'm allowing these trunks to stop short so that this one here being longer is out in front. These being shorter back here, I stop them way in the back. I'm going to add a little bit more darkness to this, what I call the dry ditch here. A little bit here, a little bit there. I'm not overly concerned about it. And then I'm going to go into the background where it's open back here. I want to show a little bit more value change back there. And I also want to show a couple things out in front. So I'm adding the cobalt blue and the sap green together. And take a little bit of the brown here to slightly gray it. And I want to have this, I want a couple of pine trees back in here. Very simple. Kind of a grouping. And then a couple that are up there in back of the yellow here, just to create a little bit more illusion of a little bit more depth. So I'm drying my brush off on the paper towel and slightly just putting these colors in. Just a little bit, not all the way across, just on this one side. Now I'm going to add some more of the green, yellow green in here, mixed right in with the blue, the cobalt blue that is. And I want to add some subtle movements within this area. Small movements, nothing big. I also want to add a couple accents of the yellow back in here. And a little bit in the foreground. So I'm really glazing across the previous colors. Now, I want to take, I might be jumping the gun here a little bit, but I want to take my small rigger or liner, and I want to put in a few of these branches that come off. And this overlapping parts that I'm putting in across the other trees will help some of that. The water down for the ones in the back here. And this is the part where you could fiddle with the watercolor for a number of hours sometimes. It depends on what you want to do with it, how you want it to look. The longest part of the watercolor is at the end where you're deciding what you want to put in, what you want to leave out. You've already decided what you want to leave out, but I've got a nice airier feel, a much airier feeling than what was in the photograph. I did not want to overwork it with that heavy feeling. I want it to be a little bit more light and airy. Which I think we're accomplishing that. And I want to put a little bit of texture in this area in the foreground. But one of the things that I've seen students do in the past, I'm just bringing it up because it came to my mind, is they put another color on their palette halfway through or towards the finish. You never really want to do that for the fact that you're adding a foreign color that will not work unity with the rest of the painting. I've seen it done numerous times, which you have to be careful in adding something. In other words, don't ever do it, because you can cause yourself a lot of heartache by saying, I shouldn't have added this, I shouldn't have added that. I'm just adding some texture on top of some of these things in here, just to give it a little bit different look to it. And I had done that as a student. And I can't tell you how sorry I was, because the painting was going along well and I got overzealous. I thought, well, if I add something here right now, I can make it look really cool. Well, I ruined the painting. So I'm looking at different things I need to add to hold up the pine boughs that I have initially put in. But I have messed up enough paintings. I have a landfill somewhere in my name, I'm sure. I'm going to look at a few little things in the photograph at this point. I haven't been looking at the photograph a lot at this point. It's kind of a crevice little thing here and there. Usually at this time in the painting, I am standing up, looking at it, deciding what I want to do next, how I want to handle this or how I want to handle that. I'm going along and kind of adding a few descriptive brushstrokes around this, kind of disguise it. Again, I don't want too much goofing around with the painting at this point. Even when I'm doing a workshop, when I'm walking around helping students, I'm looking back at my painting that I have propped up, and I'm deciding what I need to do next. So I'm always encouraging the students to get up off of their seat and take a look at it from 5, 6, 7 feet away. It does help you view it from a distance on what you need to do next. I'm adding a little bit of warmth in on some of these trees here and there, but not equally everywhere. Now, just a couple more things, and I think we'll call it. I want to add some light into this spot, so I'm going to take these scratched out things that I put in before, and I'm going to be very carefully lifting them to help break this dark area up just a little bit. I think I might add, so I'm rinsing out the brush and then I take all the moisture out of it, and I'm kind of, what I'm doing is scrubbing the paper ever so slightly, and I'm going to go over it again until I get where I want it to go. Then I'm going to take a little bit of the blue here and a little bit of the yellow. That's the cobalt blue. And I'm going to spritz just a little bit in here to start with, a little bit over in here, just to strengthen the part of the painting that is more in shadow. And just a few more areas, and I think I'll call it. I think I'm going to add just a little bit more up in here. Just since it's just a tad weak. So I'm just taking the very end of the toothbrush with not a lot of pigment on it, at the very end of the toothbrush, pulling back on it. If I want a big spray, I pull it back and pull it back from the paper, but being very close to the paper, I can direct it where I want it to be. I'm going to take the pure pigment in a clean spot, and I'm going to add a little bit of accent color into the shadow area. I've got a drip right here, which I don't want that to show. And I am just trying to get an idea of when it's finished. Sometimes you don't know. I've had paintings in my studio, one painting in particular, a whole year looking at, because I thought there's something I don't like about it. And I finally saw it after a year, and I decided, okay, that's what I'm going to do. It needed to have some unity. I did a wash through the background very, very quickly without wetting the paper at all. And I entered it into a jury show, and I did get an award on it, which I was very happy with. But I wonder if I would have got the award if I did that or not, because judging a show is sometimes it's just the luck of the draw. I'm going to bring a little bit more light into here, back in here, just to make this flow in a little bit nicer. And I want to bring a little bit of light up in here. What I'm doing is I'm squinting down, blurring my eyes that I can see the values a little bit nicer. And I did warm this up quite a bit back there for a reason. So your eye is drawn into the background also just a little bit more than what's in the photograph. But I'm going to bring a few little yellows into here. Pull it forward a little bit. There's a lot of color in the foreground. I'm going to move this up to the camera that you can see this. Okay, but I made it the whole scene lighter, airier than what the photograph was. I took a little bit of the brown oxide and added that in with the yellow. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to almost call it here. I'm going to take my number 3 or 4 brush, whatever I have here. And I want to do one more light colored tree with the transparent brown oxide. I want to put one in here. I want to put one right out here, separated from the rest, much lighter. I kind of closed it in a little bit, enough to make say it's done. So I'm going to take the tape off and you can see where we're at. This always gives me an idea of the subject matter with a mat. I always use neutral color mats. I don't use color unless it's a inner fillet is what I call it. An inner mat showing maybe a 1/2 inch, but the outer mat is always neutral, whether it be an off-white, a white, or a slightly grayed down mat. But it's always something that is neutral, because if you have a mat that overpowers the painting, to me, that tells me that you didn't want people to look at the painting, you want them to look at the mat. You want them to look at the painting. So there we are. We're done with my interpretation of what this should be. It's not so heavy feeling. I want to thank you for watching, and I want to thank the people again for supporting me on a cup of coffee. I appreciate it very, very much, because we do need to get that tower in. Thank you. And if you see anything you like, you can comment on Facebook or YouTube for me. Thank you again,
Happy Thanksgiving.
and have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.